Hello, and welcome to this 20-minute WebEx designed for our NPD clients to best leverage our store-level enabled data set, including the insights gained from retail distribution and velocity measures, and the ability to assess sales performance down to a specific geographic location. We hope this session will provide you with the ideas for not only maximizing your product portfolio internally, but also to help facilitate more productive conversations with your key retail partners. Before we dive in, let's take a quick minute to review the measures we'll be referring to today. Distribution describes how well a product is penetrated at stores. We usually look at this on a weighted basis, which takes into account how much industry volume each stores drive. Brands and items that are carried in higher volume stores have more opportunity to sell than those brands and items that are carried in smaller stores with perhaps lower foot traffic and sales. Assortment describes how well shelved a brand or item is. Velocity describes how well a product sells where it has the opportunity to sell. You'll also commonly hear this term referred to as the productivity or efficiency of a brand or item. And finally, brand development. Within our store-level enabled data set, you're able to look at sales performance down to a geographic DMA level. Development is a measure that describes how well a brand or item is selling in a particular DMA relative to the total U.S. national average. Full definitions and explanations of these measures are included in an appendix at the end of this presentation. Much of the value of the core sales and market share data from NPD comes in having that context of the competitive environment and being able to prove your performance versus other brands, as well as to be aware of potential risks from other brands. The store-level enabled measures add on another layer of value by looking at performance from the point of view that matters most to your current and potentially future retail partners: productivity. When a manufacturer can build an efficient product portfolio and prove to its retailers that it is making productive use of that precious shelf space and making strong contributions to the retailer's sales, these performance metrics can be leveraged to further strengthen the retail support you receive for things like protecting your current placement from other brands that might be looking to expand, expanding your own assortment to more retailers, expanding your assortment with your current retail partners, or improving visibility with your current retail partners, perhaps via secondary placement, freestanding displays, or even obtaining some promotional funds for circulars, FSIs, and things of that nature. Secondly, we'll talk about regional strategies for growth to impact overall performance at the national level. Let's begin with leveraging the distribution and velocity measures as a way to optimize product portfolios. For an established manufacturer to be able to show strong current sales coupled with a healthy year-over-year growth pattern, or for a new manufacturer to be able to prove that they have the ability to gain traction in a market, is an incredibly important piece of the conversation with retailers when these manufacturers are looking to maintain their current retail partnerships or even gain additional retailer distribution and support. Sales growth, and market share metrics are key for proving this story. On this slide, we can see that brand B, which is highlighted in green, is the number 2 largest brand in this particular category. And more importantly, brand B was the only brand in this category to increase its dollar sales over last year, while the number 1 sales brand above it saw its sales shrink over last year, as did the brands number 3 and 4 below it. As brand B outpaced its competition, it was able to increase its market share over last year. Clearly, this is a strong sales story for brand B, but it is only part of the story that retailers need to hear in order to determine which brands they should be carrying. Sales growth can very much be impacted by increases in distribution. If a product goes from selling in 0 stores to selling in 1,000 stores, the odds are high that sales are going to increase out of sheer availability. But high sales or sales growth does not necessarily mean that the new product is making efficient use of the retailer's shelf space. So beyond sales growth, retailers want to understand how productive these brands are that they are considering partnerships with, i.e. how quickly does that brand turn, and what is that brand's contribution to the retailer's own sales performance? And what does that contribution look like relative to all of the other brands the retailer already has in its assortment? Here we are looking at the current retail distribution of the brands on the left-hand side of the slide and dollar sales velocity per item carried on the right. This can be a money slide for manufacturers who, for example, may not have high sales because their retail availability is limited, but are selling very strongly where they are carried, which would be reflected by that dollar sales velocity measure. Sometimes we will see that a brand that has low sales but also low distribution has high velocity. When this is true, that brand has a great story to take to retailers to lobby for additional shelf space or gain better placement with their current retail partners or to gain distribution with new retailers. In this case, the data is not panning out to be particularly positive for brand B to position itself competitively against brand A, despite the fact that they were the only brand to see those dollar sales growth over last year, as shown on the prior slide. Here we can see that brand B has the second broadest distribution, sold in stores that comprise about 75% of industry sales. Brand A has broader distribution, about 15 additional points of distribution higher, and dollar sales that are more than double brand A's sales, in fact, about 120% higher. Furthermore, brand A is about 2 times more productive than brand B on the store shelves. So brand A, the highest sales-driving brand and the brand with the highest velocity, has the best story to tell. Something else to note on this slide is the item count. It can be common for item count to have an inverse effect on velocity. The more items a brand has, the higher the odds are that there's going to be 1 or 2 items that won't be productive as the rest and impact velocity at the total brand levels. In this example, however, you can see that brand A and brand B both have an average of 17 items where they are carried. While brand B would find it challenging to present a strong story for its sales performance advantage over brand A, it does have a strong story versus both brand C and brand D. For example, brand B and brand C have very similar levels of distribution. Yet we know from the prior slide that brand B's dollar sales are 40% higher than brand C's. And here on this slide, we can see that brand B has almost 40% higher velocity, even with 6 more items available. Brand B is clearly more productive for its retailers than brand C is. Putting online retailers aside, shelf space is limited, forcing retailers to make decisions every time they reset about which brands and which items they are going to sell, and how much space overall they are going to dedicate to one category versus another. Therefore, every manufacturer needs to go into line reviews prepared with a knowledge of the macro category dynamics and not just their own performance. The category we are looking at today has 90% distribution, essentially meaning that the category has no more room to grow from a sheer retailer expansion point of view. Every retailer that is meant to sell this product category already is doing so. Category growth and brand growth, therefore, is not going to come from expanded availability, but rather from selling smarter with more efficient retail assortments. To combat softening sales in this more mature category, manufacturers and retailers together have banded to broaden the assortment in the hopes that with more products on the shelves for consumers to choose from, that sales will grow. From mid-2015 to mid-2018, we can see on the left-hand chart that the average number of items carried has increased from 37 to 50. Unfortunately, though, as more items were added to the assortment, productivity declined, as we can see on the right-hand side. So the key to high sales and productivity is not necessarily to flood the shelves with more and more items, but to be smarter about what items you are putting on the shelves. And this is the opportunity for manufacturers to help retailers optimize their assortments. To be able to make effective recommendations for assortment optimization, manufacturers must come to the retailer informed about item-level performance across all brands, not just their own brand in that category, and also be prepared to proactively suggest delisting your own slow-turning items in favor of others that are more productive. Here we are looking at the current distribution and velocity of the top 50 best-selling items in the category as ranked by dollar sales. The sales velocity is represented by the bars and the distribution represented by the green diamonds. You can see that productivity varies widely by product type within the category, and it also varies widely by brand and by item. And there are some clear instances of items with high velocity that have lower than average distribution and vice versa. Items with high distribution but velocity results that really don't justify that broad distribution strategy. So to help your retail partners create the most efficient product assortment, in this example, we'd use the data to recommend expanding distribution of the 7 highlighted items that currently have low retail distribution but high productivity at the retailers where they are currently assorted. Note that this recommendation includes items that are both part of Brand B's assortment, the ones outlined in dark blue, as well as some items from some of Brand B's competitors. Conversely, we'd recommend reducing distribution for these 20 highlighted items. These are all items with current high distribution but lower productivity across both Brand B and Brand B's competition. Note that as part of this process for assortment optimization, the distribution and velocity measures are an important input, but you also need to consider the price points of each item, the product features of each item, to ensure that the retailer is carrying items across the spectrum of price points and product attributes that resonate with their consumer base, and that the retailer is not going to be over-assorted in one product segment or under-assorted in another product segment. For slower turning items, manufacturers either need to be able to demonstrate that they appeal to a unique consumer segment or offer a unique application. Otherwise, manufacturers should be thinking about proactively suggesting that these slow-turning items be candidates for delisting, and then offer up either substitutable replacement items, so something with those similar price points or similar product features that is more productive, or offering up an item that fills some white space at the retailer that could help attract a new buyer base. These same distribution and velocity measures can also be applied in a more internally focused manner to ensure your own product portfolio is optimized. Here we are looking within Brand B's own retail availability and sales velocity by 2 different product segments within the category. Over time, Brand B has increased the retail availability, both in weighted distribution and in the average number of items, of product segment 2, while decreasing the retail availability of product segment 1. Essentially, they're moving their product mix more in favor of this newer product segment 2. This mix shift has helped Brand B offset productivity declines for product segment 1, which, as you can see from the chart on the far right-hand side, have been declining over time. However, as we saw on an earlier slide, flooding the market with numerous items generally is not an efficient strategy for a retailer, nor is it an efficient strategy for a manufacturer, as there can be a risk of cannibalization within your own portfolio. So being able to monitor these measures over time can help inform your strategy for product life cycles, product pricing trends and promotional strategy, product development roadmaps, and of course guide your retail distribution strategy. Looking within Brand B's own product portfolio at the item level, there is potential to adjust your retail strategy. These items highlighted in orange are items that are taking up valuable shelf space with your retail partners, but aren't really helping to boost productivity. Therefore, they should be considered for replacement by more productive items with low distribution, such as those highlighted in green. Again, factors such as price point and product features need to be considered as part of the equation while using the velocity as one input into the retail strategy. Now let's move on to how we can pinpoint by geography the best opportunities for brand growth and how those same distribution and velocity measures we just covered can be applied to improve performance in key regions. Within NPD's data, we track sales by over 200 DMAs or designated market areas. Inherently, a brand is going to see differences in market share by these DMAs, with some being lower than their total U.S. average share and some being higher. Here we can see that brand B has 24% market share across the total U.S., but it looks like market share is above that average along the West Coast and in the Northeast, but lower than average in many DMAs in the South and Central regions. Understanding performance by DMA is a first step in building a strategy for efficient brand growth in order to be able to fine-tune any levers that might be pulled by geography. So from product assortments to pricing to promotional strategies by geography to marketing and advertising possibilities to perhaps guiding the implementation of a field sales team or evaluating the effectiveness of a field sales team already in place are just some examples of how these measures can provide actionable insights. Here we are looking at the development index for brand A and brand B in the top 25 largest DMAs as ranked by dollar sales for this particular category. Remember that a development index describes how well the brand is selling in a particular geography, whether it is selling more or less in that geography than at the total U.S. level, given the population of that geography. In this case, we can see that brand B's development is lower than brand A's development in 12 of the top 25 markets for the category. This is the same data as shown on the prior slide, but plotted on a scatter chart to easily identify what kind of strategies to implement by market grouping. The opportunity markets are those in which brand B's development greatly under-indexes that of brand A. The compete markets are those in which both brands are excelling in their development. The protect markets are those in which brand B's development is stronger than brand A's development. And then finally, we have the defer markets. These are generally ones in which neither brand has particularly high development, which is a signal that perhaps the overall category in these markets has low potential, and therefore resources would be better allocated elsewhere. We saw on the earlier slide that brand B tends to have below average market share in the South. And this region is where brand B's biggest opportunity markets are. Again, these are the markets in which its main competitor, brand A, has better development, meaning that if consumers are buying in this category, they are more likely to buy from brand A than brand B. As such, this is where brand B should consider implementing a field sales team, or if one is already implemented, then digging in to see what challenges they are facing and how they can be better addressed. This is where brand B should dedicate advertising and marketing funds to elevate its brand position and highlight its advantages over other brands. We also saw in the earlier slide that brand B has above average market share along the West Coast and in the Northeast. And these regions ultimately end up being where most of its protect and compete markets are. In other words, where brand B is particularly strong versus brand A. Here, brand B would want to maintain or even expand those marketing, pricing, promotional programs that have been key in driving its consumer satisfaction and loyalty, and ensure that brand A does not infringe on its own strong performance in the category. Here we are looking at year-over-year changes for both brand B's and brand A's sales and velocity, specifically within those 8 opportunity markets that were located along the West Coast that we had identified for brand B. The darker blue bars are showing year-over-year dollar sales growth. The green bars show year-over-year growth percentage in dollar sales velocity. So brand B's velocity is down 20% over last year, while brand A's velocity is down 10%. We'll come back to this in a moment. The blue diamonds show the percentage point change in retail distribution. And finally, the orange squares show the change in item count or assortment where carried. So why is it important to look at measures like this? Back at the beginning of our conversation today, I mentioned that growing dollars, of course, is always great for a brand to be able to show its retail partners. But if the sales growth is primarily the result of an increased distribution or an increase in assortment, that doesn't necessarily mean the brand is selling at maximum productivity in its newly expanded retail environment. What we ideally want to see on this chart is for the brands to have positive growth across all 4 metrics. That would mean the brand broadened its retail distribution and its item assortment on the shelves, its dollar sales grew year over year, and its velocity also grew. Remember that velocity is essentially a measure of how much of the retailer's total industry sale that each brand is driving. The higher the sales contribution, the more efficient or productive the brand is for its retail partners. But oftentimes, very frequently in fact, an increase in distribution will be accompanied by a decrease in velocity, and that is what occurred with both Brand B and to a lesser extent Brand A. The retail expansion outpaced their sales growth. These brands now need to dig further to see what is dragging down their velocity. Is it a newly introduced item that hasn't caught on in popularity? Is it an older item that is no longer moving but still sitting on the shelves? Similar to the exercise we did earlier, Brand B could now look at the item level performance within these 8 opportunity markets to pinpoint where they can make their retail distribution and assortment more efficient. Is it the new retail stores they expanded to? Does a field sales team need to work with those stores to get those salespeople up to speed on selling their product and comfortable with communicating the competitive advantages of Brand B over another brand? All of these insights can work together to facilitate more productive discussions with your retail partners with an eye not just to your own brand success, but to the retailer's success with the category as a whole.